We have an absolute right to self-determine who we are and to live accordingly. We need to have laws in place that support that journey and help people to live healthy, authentic lives.
Each year, around the third week of November, community members and organizations around the country work together to raise visibility of transgender people and address the issues they face. The week comes to a close before November 20th, which is Transgender Day of Remembrance, to honor those who lost their lives in acts of anti-transgender violence. Welcome to tonight's In Focus topic on Transgender Awareness Week. Our discussions aim to bring visibility, awareness, and education about Utah's transgender community. Joining us tonight via Zoom is Josie Jesse, the board co-chair for the American Foundation Suicide Prevention Utah chapter. Josie, it's great to see you tonight.
You as well, Rosie.
Josie, if you're comfortable with sharing, tell us about yourself, your journey, and your background.
Yeah, absolutely. I am comfortable to share. I will let people know, though, typically that's not something that you would ask a transgender person. It's not usually something people want to talk about. But for myself, I've known my entire life. I told my mom at the age of 7 I was a girl. Grew up fighting it based off of religious reasons, and my mom telling me I was a man. I didn't transition until I was 43, so later in life. And since I transitioned, I have done nothing but find love of life, love of myself, and happiness that I never knew could exist.
What does it feel like to be able to live your most authentic life now?
I say I see life in color because that's how I look at things anymore. I used to live life to die. I was always suicidal. I was always looking for ways to die. Joined the military to die, took risks to die. And now all I do is look at ways to live life and share life with people and encourage people. And that's what I live for, and that's what I love. I love life now, and that's what it means to me.
That's absolutely incredible, especially now because you work for the American Suicide Prevention organization, turning that around and using your own story to help others. What were some of the most difficult times during your past or your journey?
Some of my most difficult times were when my mom sent me to deliverance camp. She sent me there twice. The horrific abuse that I suffered at that. Shortly after the second time that I was sent to deliverance camp, I attempted to take my life at 16. Another time where it was extremely difficult and I wasn't sure I was going to survive it was I was gang raped multiple times in the military. I tried to die at that point, and thankfully I didn't, and now I can live.
Really incredible to have you here. You're resilient. You're here to share your story, to prompt others to reach out for help. And we appreciate you being here so much. Today is Transgender Day of Remembrance. What does this day mean to you?
Every year this day fuels my fire. Over the last 4.5 years of my transition and my journey so far, I look at this day and I look at the numbers and I see nothing but hate. And it fuels my fire to want to spread more information about who we are as transgender. We're just people. I want to make sure that people get educated and understand that laws get put into place. So I've become an advocate. That's part of the reason I also joined with AFSP, and I'm passionate about people living life and finding their happiness. I've also founded Real Talk with Josie and do public speaking, sharing my story, trying to help educate others so that they can understand that we're just like anyone else.
And that visibility and that conversation is so important. Josie, we have time for one last question. I really want to turn it over to you. What would you like our viewers to know tonight, or what's your underlying message?
My underlining message that I always tell people is believe you can and you will. You know, you've got to believe in yourself first, and you have to love yourself first. Um, we're all the same inside. It doesn't matter age, race, color, religion, whatever tag you want to use, we're all the same. We got to love ourselves, believe in ourselves, and then we start making changes as we affect other people in our lives.
Josie, I wish I had more time to talk to you. Every time I get to hear your story and hear your encouraging words to others, I always want to hear more. But we're glad that you're able to spend some time with us tonight, especially for Transgender Awareness Week. Thank you so much for being here. You've been hearing from Josie Jesse, the board co-chair for the American Foundation Suicide Prevention Utah chapter. We appreciate you being here and sharing your personal story with us.
Thank you for having me, Rosie.
Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus segment tonight on Transgender Awareness Week. Our discussion aims to raise visibility, awareness, and education about Utah's transgender community. Joining us live in studio tonight is Samantha Taylor, Secretary of Board of Directors for the LGBTQ+ Chamber of Commerce. Samantha, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Samantha, at your own comfort level, can you tell us about yourself and your journey?
Sure. So I knew I was trans from about as early as I can remember, but I only transitioned about 2 years ago. And I'm not sure what else you really want to know.
Well, how does it feel to be able to live your authentic self now?
It's great. No more hiding, no more wasting energy repressing who I am. It's wonderful.
Now, if you're comfortable with sharing, what were some of the more difficult parts about your transition process?
I think the hardest part is it's just so poorly understood, and especially the way a lot of the media makes this out to be. People don't really understand that, you know, I'm the same person I always was, and that, you know, you end up losing a lot of friends. You find out who your real friends are. You tend to lose a lot of family. And, you know, I think that's the most difficult part is transition can be very lonely because you lose so many people in your life during it.
But during that process, you really weed out people and you find out who are the true and the good ones. This is a question that you and I really wanted to discuss. How is it being trans specifically in the state of Utah?
So Salt Lake is actually a very good city. Last year, or over this last year, the Chamber of Commerce and other organizations have worked closely with Salt Lake County to make things better here for LGBTQ people and trans and gender nonconforming people in general. So Salt Lake is very good, but the state in general does need some work. We still encounter a lot of discrimination in employment and housing, and that's something that we continue to fight.
Now, you shared some photos of you and your children at the downtown Salt Lake City flag display. Today, November 20th, is Transgender Day of Remembrance. What does the day mean to you? What was that experience like, taking your kids to go see the flag display in downtown Salt Lake?
That was tough for them. You know, one of the things I've had to explain to my children throughout this process is that calling me dad in the wrong place in the wrong point in time around the wrong people could end up with us getting killed. And that's really difficult for small children to understand. And I have been fortunate here in Utah. I have had a few close calls. And overall, Utah is fairly safe. But that's something that my kids have struggled with, is understanding, you know, why do people hate me just for being who I am.
I have a follow-up question for you. If there's someone who's in your position now, maybe they're trying to get their younger children to understand this, where can they go for support, resources, or who can they reach out to if they don't really know how to navigate that?
You know, there's a lot of really good therapists in the state, family therapists who can help with that. I highly, highly recommend the counselors either at Encircle or Flourish Counseling. Who I believe, it's been a while since I've talked to any of my friends over there, still do some family counseling in this department.
So some final words. What would you like our viewers to know tonight, or what is your underlying message?
I would just like people to know that, this is what trans looks like. We're not scary. We're your coworkers, your family members, your friends, your neighbors. And we just want to be accepted in the community as who we are. And there's no need to be afraid.
Well, that's the thing. Like, you and I are no different, right? We bleed the same, we think the same, we like the same things. And a lot of people, sometimes when I talk to them, are surprised that they know people who are trans. It's just like, they're among your family and your friends, and this is what we want to do with this conversation, is to increase that visibility. You've been hearing from Samantha Taylor, Secretary for the Board of Directors for the LGBTQ+ Chamber of Commerce. Samantha, we appreciate you being here tonight and being a part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to our third and final In Focus segment tonight on Transgender Awareness Week. Joining us tonight is Becca Green, the board chair of the Transgender Education Advocates of Utah, or TUtah. Becca, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us about your organization, T of Utah. What is your mission, and what services do you offer?
So, Transgender Education Advocates of Utah, as the name suggests, we do education and advocacy rather than direct assistance. And so what that really means is we educate trans folks about the resources and the rights that they have. We advocate to create more rights and resources for our community. And we educate our cis neighbors about what they can do to help in that struggle and help make more resources and rights available to protect trans people. We also do trainings with workplaces, government organizations, or any group that just wants to be more inclusive or develop a policy for inclusion or how to handle a trans person within their group or in their workplace. Say they have a person who is transitioning there at work, or they've hired someone who's trans. We also work with trans folks to help guide them through name changes, situations where they run into discrimination, and most importantly, connect them with their community so they know that they're not in the struggle alone.
All crucial services to help improve quality of life for our transgender community. Today is November 20th. Let's talk about Transgender Day of Remembrance. Why is this event so important for our local community?
So Transgender Day of Remembrance began in 1999 as a way to remember Rita Hester, who was killed in 1998. And the trans woman who organized this event, when she was putting it together, she was distressed by just how few people had heard Rita's name or the name of other trans folks who'd been lost to violence in recent years. And she realized that because of some of the barriers trans folks face to being identified correctly or being called by their given name or having what happens to them reported accurately in the news coverage of their deaths, that somebody needed to say their names. And from that start in 1999, Transgender Day of Remembrance has grown into an international event that's held in numerous countries. And that's the most important component of it, is we come together and we say the names of the folks that we've lost, and we raise awareness so that people realize that we're facing an epidemic of violence and we need your help.
Yeah, and that we'll never forget them, right? That's also very crucial to why we do this. What kind of impact has the COVID-19 pandemic has on the trans community?
Well, I think it's important to remember that trans folks, we're your neighbors, we're your friends, we're your family members. So in a lot of ways, the impact from COVID-19 is to us the same as all of the folks watching at home. Everything's a little bit more uncertain, there's new dangers, there's new complication. Beyond that, I think it's also important to recognize the trans community is intersectional. And so, trans folks, we have people of color, folks who are unhoused, people who face insecurity or financial instability. And when you're already dealing with those barriers and COVID hits, all of that becomes more complicated. And unfortunately, so many members of our community are dealing with all of that on top of, they may not have the right documentation that identifies them by name, so it's difficult to apply for jobs or find safe housing. And so they're navigating a complicated world with some setbacks, and it just makes everything about COVID a little bit more difficult. Beyond that, hospitals are obviously stretched to capacity, and so unfortunately, a lot of the affirming healthcare that trans folks need access to is considered, non-essential or elective. And so, in addition to that, some folks aren't able to access the affirming care that they would normally be able to get.
Now, Becca, you are a former journalist with 7 years of experience. What would you say is something that our media outlets can do to better humanize and show respect to our trans community?
So there are so many things, but there's two big ones. The first is that, and I remember this from my days in journalism, news tends to be very focused on the public record, court documents, the police statement. And I think we have to recognize that that is an incredibly cis-centric way to look at things. So many trans people don't have that updated documentation. They don't get to live as themselves within those systems. And so as important as it is to verify and go to those old standbys, we have to realize that just because a court document identifies someone a certain way, that doesn't mean that's how they'd like to be called or how they live their life or how they'd like to be addressed. Just want to add, and the second thing is, trans folks, we're not inherently political. We just want to live our lives. We want to be able to access a bathroom. We want to be able to exist in public safely. And there's this perception that when you talk about trans people, you have to cover the other side. And that's something we don't do for other folks facing discrimination. And I just would call on folks to remember that you can cover trans people as people without making our entire existence political.
Exactly. There is no getting the other side when it comes to bringing visibility to our trans folks. We have time for one more question. I know 2020 has been a very hard year, but there have been some high points, right? Voters gave us at least 8 transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming state candidates victories on Election Day, including tapping the nation's first openly transgender state senator. What does the future look like for the trans community, and what keeps you optimistic?
I think the future is very bright. We're often 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. A lot of the issues you see that come up in politics and the news relating to trans folks are not new. What's new is the visibility. And unfortunately, there are bad faith actors out there who have realized that they can, make us a political football or a wedge issue, so to speak, because that motivates a certain portion of the electorate. And so as things get better for trans people and as visibility increases, some of that pushback becomes a little bit stronger. But even though it is, progress and setbacks, I think the overall trend is progress, and the pushbacks we're seeing are, in some ways, hopefully, the death throes of a very bigoted way to live your life.
And it's organizations like T Utah that's really helping pushing this forward. We've been hearing from Becca Green, the board chair of the Transgender Education Advocates of Utah. Becca, thank you so much for being here tonight and being part of this very crucial conversation.
We appreciate the platform. Thank you so much.